This workshop is about how to get things done when you don't necessarily feel like getting things done. My name is Tim. I'm a writing tutor down in the Learning Center. Here's what we're going to talk about today. I won't read these, but this gives you an idea of where we're going to go. We're going to talk about what motivation means, kinds of motivation, how certain attributes affect motivation, maybe a little bit of strategies, and then we'll talk about how to address roadblocks to motivation. Motivation, when I talk about it, here's what I have in mind, and this is actually the dictionary definition, but I'm going to stress one part of it. The part that I want to stress is the desire or willingness. When we act, when we choose to take an action, we usually have reasons for doing that. That desire or willingness that underlies the reason that we take an action, we choose something, is what I want to concentrate on when I say motivation. And here's the reason I want to do that. There are two kinds of motivators. If we boil everything else away, there's two kinds. There's gaining pleasure and there's avoiding pain. The levels of pain and pleasure that we feel are going to be different from person to person. And this is important to motivation because if I don't know the levels of pleasure or pain that I can feel, I may not be able to motivate myself. In general, people are going to go to greater lengths to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. So we can think of skydiving as an example of this. Most of us won't skydive, or we would choose not to, even if we could, even if we knew it was relatively safe, we wouldn't do it because there's always that chance, right? And even if we didn't, even if somebody said it's perfectly safe to go skydiving, you will not, I know to a certainty you won't get hurt, many of us still wouldn't do it because there is that feeling inside of us still, that drive, that there is that chance. We're scared of it for that reason, if that makes sense. The other side of this is that people tend to experience pleasure in a very fleeting and temporary way. If I ask you to think back to a time in your life when you felt great pain, you can probably remember it very vividly, maybe where you were, even what smells or things were happening in the room. But if I ask you to do something similar with a time that you experienced great pleasure, I know for me, I may even struggle to remember a time that I experienced as great of pleasure as the pains that I've experienced. Pleasure comes and goes. Pain tends to stick around for us. And that's why we sometimes think of people as being risk averse. That means that they'll avoid any kind of situation where there could be pain. Most of us aren't that way. We'll embrace some pain if it means that we'll have greater pleasure. We're all here, as in like we're all humans and we were born, right? And that means that at a certain point, someone decided that it was worth going through the pain of childbirth in order to bring a new life into the world. And this is what I have in mind here. If we were so afraid of pain that we would do anything to avoid it at all, then none of us would probably be here. Sometimes for people, pain and pleasure can be reversed. So it may be that what causes me pain may cause you pleasure. And I don't have anything weird or necessarily deviant in mind here. What I'm thinking is that for some people, something like running a triathlon or a marathon is fun. It's pleasurable for them. Climbing Mount Everest is a thing that people do because it's pleasurable, in spite of the fact that it costs tens of thousands of dollars to climb Mount Everest. Nobody pays you to get to the top. It's just to say you've done it. And there's an immense amount of pain involved in these three activities, and yet people do them because of the pleasure they'll get at the end. And that's what we want to try to harness, is that pleasure that gets us through to the end, even when there's pain. I'd like us to do a really quick thought experiment here. I want you to imagine that I'm going to pay you $1 million to be in my experiment. In my experiment, I'm going to hook you up to this machine, and you're going to be subjected to the most intense pain you can imagine, getting eaten alive by a shark times 1,000. But no permanent damage will be done. You're not actually going to be physically hurt. Nobody's going to be like, a shark won't actually be eating you. You'll just feel as though a shark is eating you. Would you do it? And you can pause here, but I would really encourage you to kind of think through if you would really do this, if you would take this bet. If you said yes, why? Why would you do it? If you said no, why wouldn't you do it? Let's cash this out just a little bit. For those of you who said yes, what if you only had a 50-50 chance of winning the $1 million? Would you still do it? I'm guessing now a number of you are going to say no. What if the $1 million was paid 20 years after the experiment? So you're going to get the $1,000,000. You have to go through the experiment today and you'll get paid in 20 years. Little different, right? What if the $1,000,000 is paid today, but the experiment wouldn't take place for 20 years? Well, now I'm guessing that some more of you said yes, right? Because I get the $1,000,000 now, right? Now, you in 20 years may be angry at you today for taking that $1,000,000, but you would do it. We could do this all day. We could imagine different levels of pain and pleasure. Maybe the experiment only lasts 1 minute. Maybe you get paid $1,000,000,000. Maybe you get infinite money, right? And we would probably find an appropriate level for each person of pleasure and pain that would make them willing to do this experiment. This is the thing that we need to learn to leverage for ourselves. And in order to leverage it, we need to know these 3 principles. The short term outweighs the long term. I will always do, just as a human being, our drives are that we're going to do anything that we can to avoid short-term pain over long-term pleasure. If we're functioning just from our instincts, this is. We can learn to play with these things, but if we're functioning from our instincts, these principles are true. The short-term outweighs the long-term. We'll do more to avoid present pain, so I call this immediacy. The pain is right here, right now, than to gain present pleasure. The third principle, a certain pleasure or pain, something that I know is going to happen, is more urgent than an uncertain one. Think of that 50-50 split with $1,000,000, right? That's that certain pleasure. I don't know that I'm going to get it. And so I'm willing to undertake less pain because I don't know for sure if I'll get the money. When we look at these, one of the things we can think about is, we'll see this in just a moment, I'm going to experience pains in college. They're not going to be physical pains probably, right? Like nobody's going to be doing torture to you, but we're going to have mental pains. We're going to have exhaustion. We're going to have things that we just don't enjoy doing, classes we don't like. And the pleasures aren't that many. They may just be getting a good grade. So we have to find a way to weigh these things out, a way to motivate ourselves. And this is our project here, to motivate ourselves to undertake some pain to get pleasure. Let's look at a case study. So Maria is a student at ECC and she wants to be a nurse because her favorite aunt is a nurse. She has to take this chemistry course, but she is really struggling. She has a high D, she thinks, but she needs at least a C. She can't understand the professor. She doesn't understand the material. She has a test in 2 days and she knows that she needs to study, but even just looking at her book fills her with dread and frustration. Think through these questions with me. And again, pause if you need to, but try to come up with an answer. What is motivating Maria? Well, I would say it's her future desire to be a nurse. Something in the future. In this case, if she's taken a chemistry course, it may be that she's not even in the nursing program yet. So she may be looking 2 to 3 years in the future to be a nurse. Would it help her to think about the possibility of getting a good grade? So imagining that possibility. No, probably not, right? The possibility isn't certain. She might get the grade and she might not. But the pain is present right now, right at this moment. And so that if we think back to our principles, it's a future pleasure versus a present pain. It's a certain pain, it's an uncertain pleasure versus a certain pain that's present right now. She's going to have trouble getting motivated. So what could Maria do right now to motivate herself to study? One of the things that I wish we had more time in this video to do is talk about strategies and methods, because this is really where you're going to need to know yourself. You're going to need to know what motivates you, because it's going to be different for each person. Let me give you a couple of my ideas for Maria. Maria could call her favorite aunt and talk to her. That may give her a sense of what she wants to be, what she wants to do. Maybe she could even ask her aunt if she had struggled and what she did to overcome that. If you were Maria, and I'll say a little bit more about this in the next slide. If you were Maria, what would you do to motivate yourself to study? So one of the things Maria needs to do is she needs to clear obstacles to action. She's got these things standing in her way of studying for this quiz, and we've got to get those things off the road, out of the way. Here's one thing. Motivation breeds motivation. Maria's having trouble just getting started. If she can just pick one thing to do, even if it's an arbitrary thing, Even if it's, I'm going to open my chemistry book to the chapter I need to study, and I'm going to read the first paragraph until I understand it. Or I'm even just going to read the first paragraph. Or I'm going to look at the first picture that I see and try to understand it. If she can do that and link a couple of those really simple actions together, just get started, she's going to do a lot better. And more importantly, there's a snowball effect to that, where as she succeeds at those simple tasks, she's going to build more and more motivation. She's going to become unstoppable. Another thing she could do is she could use visualization. She could imagine herself looking at the book, not necessarily needing to be scared. She could imagine even feeling good looking at the book. She can imagine herself being confident. She could think about what it's going to look like when she's done with studying for 15 minutes and how she's going to know something brand new that she didn't know before. She could be accountable to others. And what I have in mind here is she could work with a classmate to study. She could tell her family what goals she set for that day to study. She could call her aunt and be accountable to her aunt. These are all things that would give her somebody outside of herself, another person, to say, did you do what you said you were going to do? The last thing, and this has less to do with Maria and maybe more to do with us, but we need to be honest with ourselves. The best way to get good at motivating yourself is to know what gives you pleasure and to know what causes you pain. In Maria's case right now, it's this chemistry textbook, and it's causing a ton of pain. And so she's going to need to find something really, really pleasurable to offset that. This could be something simple. One method I like to use is I'll set a goal of studying for 20 minutes, and then I'll take a break for 5, and then I'll do another 20 and I'll take a break. And when I take the break, I have to get up and do something I enjoy or something that takes my mind off of what I'm doing. Some people really enjoy using that time to jump rope or take a quick jog or take a walk or do some kind of physical activity. And that's a great thing to do because it kind of gets the blood going again. What you'll do during that time is all about you. And there's no way for me to know that. The only person who can know that, who can judge that motivation, is you. So be honest with yourself. This has been working when you don't feel like it. I hope that you picked up maybe a tactic or two, but more importantly, my hope is that you understand where motivation comes from and the work that you need to do to weigh out pains and pleasures in order to motivate yourself. If you'd like to come down and get a more kind of personalized touch to this, or you'd like to talk to me about really specific factors in your life or really specific motivational strategies that you could use, I'm down in the Learning Center 40 hours a week. Come down anytime and make an appointment with me, and we'll sit down and really customize this to what will help you best. Thanks, and let's get to work.